You know a car is serious when it was built just to shut up the competition. Born out of a racing feud, engineered to dominate corners, and wrapped in one of the most iconic designs ever bolted together in Dearborn, the Boss 302 is a brawler with manners. This isn't your average pony car. It is the story of an underdog that punched above its weight, earned its stripes on the track, and returned decades later with a chip on its shoulder. Let's get right into it. Chapter 1. Why the Boss was born. Back in the late 1960s, the muscle car wars were in full swing. Ford had already made its mark with the Mustang, a car that single-handedly kicked off the pony car craze when it debuted in 1964. But by the end of the decade, the competition was catching up fast. Chevrolet had launched the Camaro in 1967, and with it came the Z28, a track-focused, high-revving weapon built for one thing: winning the SCCA Trans-American Sedan Championship, better known as Trans Am. Trans Am was where automakers went to prove who could really build the best all-around car, not just the quickest in a straight line, but the one that could survive and dominate in real road racing. Ford's Shelby GT 350 had been their weapon of choice early on, but it had softened over time, drifting more toward grand touring than track-bred terror. Ford needed a fresh contender, something sharp, agile, and built from the factory with one goal in mind: beating Chevy at its own game. Enter the Boss 302. This wasn't just a Mustang with some extra chrome and a loud exhaust. It was purpose-built to be the backbone of Ford's Trans Am effort. It had to be powerful, sure, but more importantly, it had to handle. It had to be reliable. And it had to meet the strict homologation rules of the SCCA, which meant building enough road-legal versions to qualify it for racing. The stakes were high. Ford wanted to win, and the Boss 302 was the car they were betting on. Chapter 2. What made the Boss 302 special? Let's talk about hardware. The Boss 302 wasn't some parts bin special. It was a Frankenstein's monster of engineering in the best way possible. The engine started with a 302 cubic inch Windsor small block V8. But instead of using the regular heads, Ford engineers bolted on the cylinder heads from the 351 Cleveland, a completely different engine. These heads had massive ports, canted valves, and breathed like a much bigger motor. The result? A high-revving, solid-lifter screamer that loved to live near 7,000 RPM. It was officially rated at 290 horsepower. While block exact real-world figures vary, many enthusiasts believe the actual output was higher than the official rating, but a fast engine alone doesn't win races. The Boss 302 got a heavy-duty suspension with stiffer springs and shocks, a front anti-roll bar, quick ratio steering, and 4-piston front disc brakes. It came with a close-ratio 4-speed manual transmission and a 9-inch rear end with either a 3.50, 3.91, or 4.30 gear ratio, depending on how crazy you wanted to get. It could do 0 to 60 miles per hour in around 6.9 seconds and run the quarter mile in the mid-14s. Not bad for a car built in the 60s and tuned for corners, not just straight lines. Chapter 3. Style with Substance. Larry Shinoda, the guy who helped design the Corvette Stingray, gave the Boss 302 its mean look. He wasn't interested in chrome and flash. He wanted aggression and stealth, and he nailed it. The design language of the Boss 302 was pure function-driven muscle. Everything you saw had a purpose. The matte black hood? That wasn't just for looks. It was there to kill glare on sunny track days. The front chin spoiler and rear deck spoiler? They added real downforce at high speeds, something few muscle cars of the time even considered. The stance was lowered, the wheels were wide, and the graphics were bold but not excessive. The Boss 302 decals running down the fenders told everyone this wasn't just another Mustang, while the optional rear window louvers and side scoops added flair and function. Even the color options, like Grabber Blue, Calypso Coral, and Grabber Orange, were selected to make a statement. Inside it was Spartan, but by design. Ford stripped out the fluff in favor of focus. High back bucket seats, a Hurst shifter, a basic gauge cluster, and not much else. This was a cockpit, not a lounge. The Boss was built to be driven hard, not shown off, parked. Chapter 4. Trans Am glory. Ford didn't just want to sell a cool car, they wanted to win races. And in 1970, they did exactly that. With legendary racer Parnelli Jones at the wheel and Bud Moore Engineering running the show, the Boss 302 took the championship in the SCCA Trans Am Series. The Trans Am Series was no joke. It was the proving ground for American performance cars, with tight regulations that made every modification count. Engines had to be under 5.0 liters, suspension had to be production-based, and tires? No slicks. Just the same kind of rubber you could buy at your local dealer. Winning meant your car was genuinely better, not just heavily modified. The 1970 season was a bloodbath of competition. Chevy's Camaro Z28 was fast, the AMC Javelin was rising in strength, and Chrysler's efforts with the Plymouth Barracuda and Dodge Challenger were no slouches. But Ford's Boss 302, tuned to perfection and driven with grit by Parnelli, outpaced them all. His driving was fearless, often pushing the limits of grip and sanity. The result? A driver's championship, a manufacturer's championship, and a car that earned its stripes not just in magazines, but on the asphalt of tracks across America. This win wasn't just a trophy, it validated the entire Boss 302 project. Ford had gambled on a road racing Mustang, and it paid off. The legacy was locked in. The Boss had gone toe-to-toe with the best and come out on top. Chapter 5. The Moffett Cheating Saga. As with any fiercely competitive motorsport series, controversy wasn't far behind. The 1970 Trans Am season had its share of tension, but one of the juiciest episodes involved Ford's own racing arm in a behind-the-scenes maneuver that's become known as the Moffett Cheating Saga. To compete in Trans Am, manufacturers had to build a minimum number of cars with the same specifications as their race versions. This rule was meant to keep racing grounded in real-world vehicles, not one-off specials. But Ford, determined to squeeze every ounce of performance from the Boss 302, allegedly circumvented this regulation by manipulating the homologation process. Moffett Engineering, a firm associated with Ford's racing development, played a questionable role. According to insiders and racing historians, a number of production Boss 302 parts, especially special intake manifolds and lightweight body components, were supposedly installed in only a few cars, just enough to satisfy inspection. These parts were often removed immediately after inspection or were never truly intended for mass production. This kind of bending the rules wasn't unique to Ford, to be fair. Chevrolet, AMC, and others played the same game. But Ford's involvement with Moffett raised eyebrows because of how closely it was tied to the factory racing program. It was a wink and nod situation. Do just enough to get the paperwork signed, then go racing with equipment that most customers would never see. While there are accounts of manufacturers, including Ford, pushing the boundaries of homologation rules, specific details about Moffett Engineering's involvement are less documented. Such practices were not uncommon in the competitive environment of Trans Am racing. The scandal never erupted into full-blown penalties, but it left a stain on Ford's otherwise legendary 1970 season. It also highlighted just how intense the Trans Am series had become, so competitive that manufacturers were willing to blur the lines between fair play and flat-out cheating. And in a weird way, it added to the Boss 302's mystique. It wasn't just a fast car, it was part of a larger chess game being played by automakers desperate to win. Chapter 6. The Short Life and Sudden Death. Despite all its success, the Boss 302 was only produced for 2 years, 1969 and 1970. That's it. Just 2 years of greatness before it was retired. But why the short run? Timing was everything. By 1971, the entire performance car market was taking a hit. Insurance companies were cracking down on high-horsepower vehicles, making them brutally expensive for younger buyers to insure. At the same time, government regulations were tightening, emission standards, safety requirements, and fuel economy mandates were all making it harder to justify building raw, aggressive muscle cars like the Boss. The cultural climate was shifting too. The free-spirited muscle car image of the 60s was giving way to a more pragmatic, cautious 70s mindset. People were looking for economy, comfort, and practicality. The idea of a no-frills race car for the road just didn't have the same appeal. Then came the 1971 redesign of the Mustang. The new model was bigger, heavier, and more luxury-oriented. It was no place for something like the Boss 302. Ford pulled the plug. The car that had earned its reputation in the fire of competition was gone, leaving behind a 2-year legacy that would grow into myth over the decades. Its death was sudden, but its impact was lasting. Chapter 7. The Revival, 2012 to 2013, Boss 302. Despite all its success, the Boss 302 was only produced for 2 years, 1969 and 1970. That's it. Just 2 years of greatness before it was retired. But why the short run? Timing was everything. By 1971, the entire performance car market was taking a hit. Insurance companies were cracking down on high-horsepower vehicles, making them brutally expensive for younger buyers to insure. At the same time, government regulations were tightening. Emission standards, safety requirements, and fuel economy mandates were all making it harder to justify building raw, aggressive muscle cars like the Boss. Chapter 8. Every detail that matters. Across its 2 lives, the Boss 302 delivered serious hardware. The original 1969 to 1970 Boss packed a 302 cubic-inch small-block V8 that was officially rated at 290 horsepower, though in reality it pushed closer to 350. Mated to a 4-speed close-ratio manual transmission and backed by a bulletproof 9-inch rear axle, it featured front disc brakes, a competition suspension setup, and weighed around 3,200 pounds. It hit 0 to 60 miles per hour in under 7 seconds and topped out around 130 miles per hour. Fast forward to the 2012 to 2013 revival, and the new Boss 302 featured the Roadrunner version of the 5.0-liter Coyote V8. It made 444 horsepower and 380 pound-feet of torque, redlining at a screaming 7,500 RPM. It had a 6-speed manual, 3.73 Torsen limited-slip differential, adjustable suspension, Brembo brakes, and performance tires. The modern Boss hit 0 to 60 in about 4.3 seconds and could clear the quarter mile in the low 12s. Every component was built for balance and track reliability, not just straight-line bragging rights. It wasn't just fast, it was precise. Chapter 9. The Legacy. Today, the Boss 302 is a legend. The original are prized by collectors. The 2012 to 2013 versions are loved by tracked day junkies. It's a car that was built with a purpose, not just for profit. The Boss 302 wasn't the fastest Mustang ever made. It wasn't the most powerful, but it had balance. It had guts. It had an edge. It was a driver's car, through and through. And in an era when cars are increasingly automated, quiet, and soulless, the Boss 302 reminds us what it means to drive something built for the hell of it. That's why it matters.